Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be installing the newest BimmerNetwork intake manifold upgrade on my 340i. I've had the previous version on my car for almost a year, and that was the one where you just reuse the stock core in a metal housing that adds port injection. This newest option is a full billet manifold upgrade that uses a bigger core. It's a much bigger manifold, so it should flow more air and have better cooling. So I'm really excited to try this out. You know, this is the whole reason I got the 340i, so I can do testing like this on parts and try them back to back to help you guys in case you're trying to make a decision on which way to go. So let's go ahead and get this installed on my car, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
Alright, so let's go ahead and unbox the intake manifold. This is how it comes. It has like a cover on it, but it's kind of like a cardboard crate. Nice thick material, so packaged really well. And then here on the first layer, we've got some of the hoses. I believe this is for the coolant. We've got some more lines. I'm guessing this is the fuel rail. Yeah, so this is your fuel rail for port injection. So, looks pretty good. Bunch of hardware, all the clamps and everything you need to connect all your coolant lines and screw everything together. And then under here, yeah boy. So here is the actual intake manifold. Oh yeah, it's a beefy boy. So, I guess I should hold it like this. There we go. Yeah, it's a nice finish. Of course, I went with the black. There are a couple different options available, but for me, it's always perfect as long as it comes in black, so no shame. So now that I've got the old intake manifold removed, let's look at them side by side and talk about the differences. So first of all, probably the biggest thing is just the size of the core. So you can see on the OG BimmerNetwork intake manifold, it's much thinner. This one has a much bigger core, so it can hold more coolant and should improve cooling. The OEM kind of replacement metal manifold was fine, but it definitely didn't improve IATs over stock. This one, like we talked about before, it's mostly just a way to add port injection and reduce the chance, or basically eliminate the chance, of cracking the intake manifold like you can run into with the plastic one. So this one, you'll have port injection, of course, but it also has a much bigger core so that it should be able to improve your cooling, you know, increase your coolant capacity and things like that. Now you can see these gold bungs, so that's where your port injectors go. And then you also have these smaller fittings on top. This is for nitrous, methanol, whatever else you might want to add as well. So you can run it without port or meth, or you can run either one, or you could even run both. So lots of different options here. It also has the relocated map sensor, but now it's much higher away from the valve cover, so it should be able to fit without any issues. Another big thing you guys liked is it has these prongs so that you can reuse the stock engine cover, so you don't have to delete it anymore. And then of course there's a lot of configuration. You can get it in different colors and stuff like that. I'm going to be modifying this a little bit, or I guess from the original intent. So one, of course, I'm going to be installing the Ross Racing plug over this hole. I already deleted the EVAT because this one doesn't have any of the connections for it. So I'll be plugging that hole and putting a cap on this one so I don't have to run it. The other thing is there is a hole for this return so that we can run the return line back to the coolant reservoir, but I'm just going to plug this off. I don't really want to use it, so I'm not going to. So we're going to run it kind of more like a Gen 2 style where it doesn't have a return at all. We'll vacuum fill it to make sure we get all the coolant out, and we should be good to go. So
let's go ahead and get this installed on the car. Oh, one more thing. This does come with a phenolic spacer option. I highly recommend it. I know some people run it without it. Some people say they have no issues, but I don't know what their setups are, how much boost they're running, or anything like that. All engineering principles will tell you you need to run a phenolic spacer with this, because switching it from plastic to metal means you'll have more heat transfer from the cylinder head to the intake manifold. So for something that's primary job is cooling on our cars, get that phenolic spacer, space it out so you don't have the heat transfer, and get a better grip on your IATs. So if you do get it with the phenolic spacer, it'll come with longer screws to make it fit. That's what we're going to do on my install, and that'll just make sure it future-proofs the system regardless of how much boost you run. All right, so the first thing that we need to do to prepare it for install is installing these coolant lines, and these are going to route from the water pump through the manifold and then back to the heat exchanger. So we've got a couple fittings. These are going to snap into the OEM connections, and we just slide those into here. It's very tight, so you might have to lubricate it a little bit, but that's how it should be once it's fully installed. And then just for added security, we're going to slide these hose clamps on and tighten it down on each fitting. And then we're going to go ahead and connect these onto the intake manifold. Now, if you line these up, you can see that one is shorter than the other one. So the shorter one will go on this bottom connection. The longer one will go on this top connection. So that way, you know, it evens out. Now, I like that this has very definitive signs of where it goes. So this bottom one is going to be the outlet, and the top one is going to be the inlet. So that just makes sure that you're flowing it in right. flowing this in right. So cool coolant will come into the front of the manifold. The warm coolant will come out the back and then towards the heat exchanger. So yeah, grab your extra hose clamps and then slide these on and tighten them down. And just for anybody that needs help, when you're looking in your engine bay, look for your water pump. So it's right down here, and the hose that's coming out of it, this one is your inlet. So this is going to be cool coolant, and then this is going to be warm coolant flowing back down into the heat exchanger. Now we're going to need to prepare our fuel rail. So this is for anybody that plans on running port injection. Just like everything else, this is very configurable, a lot of different options. So if you're not running port injection, you can simply block off the ends. So it comes with these screws and O-rings. You basically put the O-ring over the set screw and tighten it down to seal it off. Now on the other side, if you're running port injection, obviously you're going to need to screw in your fuel line here. But if you are coming from like a spacer plate or like a different setup, this is bigger than what your AN fitting is going to use. So I bought this adapter. It goes from a -6, that's what my fuel line is, and then it goes to a -8 O-ring, also known as -8 orb, and then this can screw right in, and then I can attach my fuel fitting onto it. Now just make sure you put it on the right side, because if you look over here, there's a little notch cut out around the hole, whereas on this side it's not. I mean, there's this little machining mark, but nothing that's actually spacing this out. So this is what's going to go on the manifold side, and this is what's going to go on the engine side. So that'll make sure that you put this fitting on the right side so it can attach from the back of the car. So tighten this down. Then we have a very unique setup for how the ejectors attach onto the fuel rail. So it comes with these additional O-rings. You're going to slide
one on each of these little spacer adapters. And then the ejector itself goes into here. So push that all the way in. And then this clip is going to slide onto here. And this is what's going to make the ejector stay attached to it. Sorry, I had it upside down. So you slide this on, and you can see basically it's attached to the adapter in this little slot, and then it attaches to the ejector in these slots as well. You can kind of see it on both sides, hopefully. So this is just how they adapt it, and then this inserts into the fuel rail. So you'll do this for each of your injectors, install them in the fuel rail, and then we'll be ready to put the port injection on the car. All right, so now we are back in the engine bay, and you can see the intake manifold is mounted, looking pretty good. I've got the phenolic spacer installed with all of the screws, the longer screws for the spacer. We've also got our Ross Racing block off to block off this EVAP port. We've got the map sensor installed that just dropped right in, so no issues with alignment or anything. Clearance is good there. It is a really tight fit in the back with those hoses, and I'm probably going to redo my fuel lines and stuff to create more space. But the good news is this manifold does have the notch in it and everything set up, so you can still remove your oil filter without removing the whole intake manifold. So we're good there. Now we need to go ahead and start adding on our accessories and stuff. First thing, of course, is remove each of these set screws, get those out, install our port injectors, and then install our fuel rail. All right, now we've removed these little screws. These are the ones that are plugging the port injectors. Of course, again, you can leave these if you're not using port injection, but bow, we've got them removed, injectors installed, and the fuel rail is installed as well. Now, one little pro tip, make sure you plug in the map sensor before you install the fuel rail. There's plenty of clearance, but if you install the fuel rail first, then you won't be able to get that connector on. And ignore this tape and stuff. I had done a map wiring extension for a previous manifold, but for this one, it'll install without modifying or cutting any wires. So now the last thing we need to do for the fuel rail is use these little screws, and these go through those little holes. So we're going to run the screw through, put a nut on the other side, and that'll clamp it down onto the intake manifold to make sure that it's held down and it doesn't go anywhere. One more thing before I go too far. So the throttle body installs with new bolts that'll come with the kit. So don't reuse your stock bolts. If you're coming from a stock intake manifold, you need these machine screws. But one thing is these bolts, the holes at least, go all the way through the flange. And on this side, at least on mine, it went through the intake manifold a little bit. And so what I recommend is putting some thread tape on this screw, the one that's in the top corner, and that'll just make sure that you don't have a boost leak through this hole, because that could create an issue. Again, I know some people said they didn't install it with thread tape and they didn't have problems, but that's just my recommendation. It's cheap, easy, and avoids any future potential issues. And yeah, pretty much after that, get everything reinstalled. Don't be like me. I completely forgot to clamp down the coupler on my charge pipe. So I drove about an hour to the track with no boost, couldn't figure out what was wrong, and realized my clamps had just fallen off. So once I had it all installed, everything worked really well. I'll be posting more data in the future on IATs and things like that as I continue testing it. But the good news is it worked well at the track when I was doing my testing. Now, there are a couple things I want to touch on before I wrap this up. First of all is, of course, double check your fuel lines and everything, because I did have some really bad fuel leaks with this kit. The first ones were coming from those injector caps. Like I said, it kind of is redundant to have those extra connections. So I'm not really sure why that was necessary, but you know, I definitely had some leaks there. And what it ended up being is the clips just weren't holding it on tight enough. So I used some pliers to just squeeze them a little bit tighter, and that helped hold the cap on better, so it was no longer causing a leak. But let your fuel system prime, double check, make sure nothing's leaking. Turn on the car, let it run at idle, make sure nothing's leaking, because once the fuel system builds up pressure, it'll create those leaks and show you if there are any issues that need to be addressed. I also had a leak at the front of the port injection fuel rail. That O-ring cracked while I was at the track. I'm not sure if it was because of the extra heat and stuff like that, but BimmerNetwork's feedback was just to double and triple check that you don't over tighten it. The O-ring will hold pressure as long as, it's not damaged. So I bought a replacement O-ring. I will post a link to that in the video description, and it's a little bit smaller, so it fits a little bit better inside of the fuel rail. But overall, once I got that addressed, again, no more issues. Another thing is that if you follow my instructions exactly as I've done it, you'll have some parts left over. So I do want to kind of mention what all of those are. The first one is this gold post. So this screws in on top of the intake manifold and allows you to basically fully mount your engine cover. So it adds that extra post for it. I don't plan on running an engine cover, so I didn't install it on mine. I actually wish we didn't have the post that's like permanently mounted, but I think because it goes like right where the intercooler is, there's no way for them to add a screw or threaded hole that you can just screw it into. So that one's permanently welded on. It's fine. Maybe one day I'll cut it off if I get that much motivation. Another thing to consider is the evap delete that I did. So I used the Ross Racing block off plugs to block off my evap connection. If you don't want to do that, then there are hoses with the kit that you can use to kind of reroute how your evap lines run, kind of hide it underneath the manifold and make it really clean. So lots of different options there depending on how you want to do it. Now, the last thing, like I showed you guys before, is I completely removed the return line for the coolant on my intake manifold. The reason is because on Gen 2s, they don't have it anyway, and I think it looks cleaner. And plus, I wanted to test it to see if there were any IAT benefits. Again, I'll have that feedback in a future video, but it worked fine at the track, and it's something that I was able to take advantage of because I can vacuum fill my intake manifold. If you don't have a vacuum fill tool, if you don't have an airline to kind of run that, then definitely install the return line, and that will make it much easier for it to bleed out all the air from your intercooler circuit, so that way you don't have any IAT issues. So it comes with these fittings as well as this hose. You screw the L-shaped fitting at the back of the manifold and then run the hose to the front of the car, and you use that additional clip-on fitting to connect it to your intercooler reservoir. And yeah, oh, one more thing. So there is an additional bracket that you can mount if you want. There are a couple screws that come with it, and you can install that at the back of the manifold to kind of hold the wiring harness that goes across the manifold in place. So that'll give it like a nice spot to keep it nice and clean. Again, I just didn't want additional clutter, so I just didn't install it on mine. But hopefully this answers any questions for those of you that want to know how the install works and how it looks once it's installed. I think it looks really good. There are a lot of different colors that you can get. And as always, BimmerNetwork is a channel sponsor. So if you guys want to support the channel, shop with us. I'll have my affiliate link in the video description and the pinned comment as well, so you can order your own. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.